December 21st for sure.
Oh,
Enough,
good, Janet.
enough's astronomy. Are we going to start? I'm waiting for Janet to start. We got to put the PowerPoint up.
Well, do you want to say anything before the PowerPoint?
That's before the PowerPoint. The hope is that we actually have some discussion. We'll see. What do you hey, discuss how do 80-year-old people discuss what to do with the rest of their life to save the world uh, other than die soon, I suppose. I don't know. But John and Iko have got requirements. They've got responsibilities again next Tuesday. So if there is a session next Tuesday, we're going to sort of continue this stuff. And the hope is that we don't, what I've got planned here can last 2 weeks. If not, please consider raising your hand and saying, I got a question. That would be perfect for me to say, oh, good. That's something I can get ready for next week too. And,
I want to hear Bob weigh in on what we should do financially. If we think that the world's going to hell in a handbasket, do we put gold bars under the bed?
You need a lot of gold bars.
Yeah.
You need a big bed.
I can assure you, I have no
Insight.
My crystal ball is from the same manufacturer as yours.
Yeah, well, my AI guy keeps making mistakes, so I'm done with him. Okay. We're gonna start then. But do raise a hand or however questions get asked, make a noise. But we're supposed to.
If you could, everybody could mute, and then if you have a question, just unmute and say Ramsay or something like that. I think that's the best way.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
you can see that I don't know what I'm doing. Janet's got this all figured out. We hope. Be patient here.
Let's see. We get it.
Be patient. I'll back up. Hit slideshow.
Yeah, I already did.
Okay.
Just a sec. Okay, I'm gonna. Sorry.
Everyone's properly muted, so you can't complain.
There we go. And then it's slideshow. Meeting. There you go.
If you can't see that, unmute and say you can't see it. Okay, you can see it. All right, so I think we've got people here, people that have joined that weren't here last week, but may have read this article. Just to sort of review a tiny little bit. This guy, Beckley, wrote this article in Foreign Affairs. I read it and said, oh my gosh, I don't see articles that are this exciting to me. Not happy articles, but at least have some thoughts about why things are such a mess these days and may continue to be so. And it's and even better than that, I sort of liked, and we won't have a discussion about this. I'll just move on. I liked his notion that the last 300 years has been in many ways a horrible 300 years. Of course, for those of us that have benefited from the Industrial Revolution and the dollar being the world currency and blah, 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 that's an odd judgment of the last 300 years. But when one considers how violent much of it has been, how many people have been harmed, if for example, you got through all of 6 sessions of Burns' new show on the American Revolution, there was an awful lot of grim stuff along there, besides the fact that the Americans eventually sort of won. So his argument is things could get really grimmer because of them trends that maybe people haven't really grasped quite yet. But as far as Beckley and others are concerned, they're coming. Demographic booms that have created enormous amounts of wealth and economic growth and benefited the West in particular are starting to turn negative and likely start becoming truly negative by 2050. Productivity, Now this is interesting. We could maybe have a discussion on this, but his take, the same, Piketty had the same take, that the productivity that you're going to get from more machines will be useful, but not necessarily anything close to the productivity growth that came with the Industrial Revolution. And that happily, that the gaining big territories by rising powers, that's probably over too. That's a good thing in the sense that rising powers can't go out and conquer. But of course, it does create the expectation for those like Russia that are still not quite caught on to what the hell's going on to try anyway. So we're going to back, Jad, I need you back here again. It's the same problem as last week. I cannot go forward here. Look, I'm pushing that down. Be patient with us here. I don't know what's going on. We had the same problem last week. Be patient.
When that happens, just try clicking on the screen.
Yeah, we
Just
did.
right,
Yeah, we
okay.
got it.
All right. So I'm just repeating what I already said. Demographic growth is slowing. Probably turning negative by 2050, except in Africa. And of course, Africa is not going to produce a lot of economic growth unless there is some help to Africa. The technological change may not, as far as Beckley is concerned, will not probably create an enormous breakthrough in productivity, at least not in our lifetimes or maybe our kids' lifetimes. And so we got this on the screen there. If you remember from last year or last week, or if people are new, it is an interesting bunch of information. Piketty gets credit for giving us this stuff. We have lived all our lives in that top 1950 to 2012 period of unbelievable economic growth and average output and average growth in global production of 3.8 for 62 solid years. Well, good Lord, you'd have to be really in trouble, like a lot of poor countries are, to not enjoy an enormous amount of change in lifestyle because of that growth. Half of that growth because of astonishing population growth, half of it because of incredible technology. You get to the middle one. Piketty's prediction was that's slowing. That was one of the reasons he wrote his book, was to say, look, we better be prepared for the fact that this is going to slow. And if it slows, there's a lot of presumptions about how you plan the future that you got to change around, because the growth that much is built on is not going to be there. He was willing to accept that technological growth would maybe produce 1.6 better productivity on average for that time period. Beckley would say it could be a whole lot less than that. So if you still get 1% economic growth, Piketty argued you can still have a much better world, a better life, but it's things have got to change in terms of who gets it and where it goes. So his argument is there's got to be a lot of adjustments to expectations, planning. A new international order doesn't hardly exist anymore. If not managed, things could be really grim for the next generation. And four particular threats. I've got up there his quote, and I can't read it because half of my screen is buried by other stuff, but it doesn't matter. This was what we heard from the 1990s, 1980s. If we just have globalization, the globalization will sort of produce better wealth for most of the world. And in fact, it has produced better wealth for most of the world, but it's not evenly shared. The so-called globalization fantasy, which people have bailed out on now. It's not working, or not working the way it was supposed to. And so if that's not going to work, you got these possibilities. And he talked about these four threats. If you were here last week, we talked about them. If you read the article, you know that the struggling states, Russia is the poster child for this now, that are not moving ahead well, could go out and try and conquer territory, but they're not going to be very successful because even the Houthis down in Yemen, poor as hell with their drones, can at least resist, if not conquer you. Fragile states that are in debt, that are still enjoying population growth, are in trouble. I think there's something like a third of the African countries right now are in some sort of rebellion or political crisis. Someone said democracies rot from within. We're well experienced with that. And then he's kind of angry at the United States, the protector of the global order, the number one protector, turns inward and becomes self-insured. Okay.
Bob raised
Bob's
his
got his hand up. Bob, go ahead.
Okay. Is it too early to ask a question?
No, of course not. No, we want this because we want to
Okay.
have
Well, you've
something
mentioned
left for next
Africa a
week.
couple of times, and
Say
you've
again?
talked about demographic growth. And I mentioned in a response on the email that I don't think we should lose sight of Africa.
Africa, of course, yeah.
Its population is going to double. Sub-Saharan population is going to double by 2050.
Yeah.
Wow.
About 1 billion more people. It will be a quarter of the world's population. Okay, so I'm mentioning demographics because Africa might save us.
Okay, yeah. So let's go ahead.
And an example is Tanzania. It's just astonishing. When they got independence from Britain in 1960 or so, their population was 10 million and Britain's was about 50 million. Today, their population is 70 million and Britain's is 60 million. And by 2050, Tanzania alone will probably have a population of 130 million. So yeah, we're losing Russia, we're losing Japan, but look what's happening in sub-Saharan Africa. And how are we supposed to understand what the future is without doing something serious with sub-Saharan Africa?
And then I'll add a little. I check this every now and then to see if I can still remember the 10 largest countries in the world. And when I checked last time, Ethiopia had just replaced Japan as number 10.
Wow.
And Nigeria is on track to be the third largest country in the world.
Yeah. I just on Tanzania as a smaller example of sub-Saharan Africa, after 40 years, it had essentially a democratic government by the 1990s. And now it's reverted to an absolutely corrupt authoritarian system.
Yeah.
Just a comment.
Yeah, that's an appropriate comment. I didn't see it. One of those East African countries, West African countries is Sierra Leone, I think, is back in civil war. Yeah, there's not enough. So Beckley mentions this. If you read through the entire article, it says this could be a saving grace. Here's a bunch of people that need work, and we're going to need workers, and we got wealth, and they don't. And but of course, that's how does that get arranged? That we're willing to lend. Apparently, China has thought about this pretty seriously. If you've been to any parts of Africa recently, we were in Ethiopia not all that long ago. China's building everything. Of course, they're building it on loans, and they're building it with Chinese workers, unfortunately. Although the best countries, Ethiopia was tried to say, we'll let you in, we'll borrow the money, but half of the workers have to be ours. They can't all be Chinese. Go ahead. Somebody else wants to make a point? John? No? Well, okay. So what do we do? And we're back to clicking on the screen here. I don't know. We'll stop here in a minute here. That was the plan, and Bob's already started us off. I think Beckley's point would be say, look, if we're going to have a 21st century global order, stop focusing on 1944 issues as we tend to be, and focus on 2025 issues. The two that he mentions, he never mentions global climate change, which really irritates me. I don't know why he doesn't. He's surely aware of it. If any of you have watched his YouTube shows, he knows everything. He's a pretty impressive guy. Let's. Any other hands up besides Bob has already introduced one.
Do you want to stop the share so you can see each other?
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's just see what happens. Unmute yourself and plop in here. What are the kinds of things, if you thought this thing through or just thinking through as we stand here, that makes sense given Beckley's warnings, which just have to happen for a new global order to arise? John, or anybody?
Yeah. So Bob sent around the results of a plebiscite in Switzerland where they voted on a wealth tax. And the Swiss people, I know this will get a rise out of Ramsay, whose love of the Swiss is enduring. But the Swiss
Deep sarcasm.
rejected the wealth tax. What was it, Bob? 70%?
I don't recall
I think it was even more
the
than that,
majority.
John. I remember it was like 80% or 78 or 80%. I mean, it was by a large majority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Piketty's solution, or not solution, but one of his ways to get things back in better order. I think everyone's familiar with this, right? One of Piketty's arguments was when you have this incredible drop in inequality between 1914 and 1950, he says, look, it wasn't because capitalism automatically redistributed wealth. It was one, because an enormous lot of wealth was simply destroyed by those two world wars. And secondly, you had this enormous growth in taxes to pay for the wars. And by 1970, in almost every country, all those high taxes on wealth had largely disappeared. Michael.
Well, I think the exclusion of climate change and mentioning sub-Saharan Africa and the massive, probably migration of people out of areas of the world which are going to become intolerable with droughts, hurricanes. I mean, all these millions of people that are being born in some of these areas are going to want to go somewhere because they basically can't survive. I don't know if he's factored that into his calculations, because something's going to happen where people are going to start moving.
Well, they already have. It's not as if it's going to happen. It's already happening. And of course, Africa is the only continent that sits there astride the equator. There's already something like 250 million people on the move looking for somewhere else. It's not all because of climate, but the majority of it is. And some people will estimate 1.2 billion people by 2050 on the move, primarily in Africa, but also in Central America.
Well, also in the United States, because people are going to start moving northward, probably into Canada, where the climate will be maybe what we'd call a mild winter, where they have a harsh winter, if we want to call it that. Those people I've heard are already moving up to Canada because, like in Minnesota, the lakes don't freeze anymore, or hardly.
So what are you suggesting as a solution to that then?
Well, I'm not suggesting it's just people are going to start moving in large numbers, even from places like the United States. I mean, it's not in Europe, and they'll be moving northward or southward where they can survive better.
If it's cross-border movement that you're going to attempt, as many people sitting here have already shared, it's not on. The Europe is already facing, not already, but seriously facing populist backlash because of a million Syrians that did move in during the Syrian crisis. And good Lord, we know what problems caused here. And yet, if you visit Central America, as I did last February and Janet did too, you get it. I mean, by Lord, the climate's falling apart on people, and so you're not a criminal to try to give your kids a better life by sneaking across the border. But so what's the solution to that? What is the solution to that, for God's sakes, David?
Well, there's a Jewish concept of the Jubilee year. I don't know if people know this, but in traditional Jewish law, every seventh, so every 49 years, all land and all wealth is evenly distributed.
Yeah.
And, we're obviously incredibly far from that. But, if you look at reparation and wealth inequality, clearly the wealth inequality is, as you pointed out last week, a huge issue when 8 people are worth as much as half of the planet. And so but it seems like movement, we're anti-immigrant at the moment, but it would seem like taking in 10 or 20 or 50 million people from Africa to help take care of us as we age would be an interesting move. I mean, you'd have to educate them and house them, and you'd have to redistribute. You'd have to put them in your spare bedroom. I mean, it's probably not happening, but it seems like something like that would be um, necessary almost to really make it work.
You're talking about an incredible revolution to get that
Right.
to happen.
Of course.
And the average African would prefer to stay in Africa. Of course, they don't prefer to stay in a place where they have no water left or their former pastures have turned to desert. That's impossible.
Right.
So, yeah. So I guess we're confirming we're not solving anything. We're just confirming what a mess this is, which
Yeah.
is a real mess. Let's see. When last we were in Ethiopia, one thing Ethiopia was doing was damming the Blue Nile. The water that arrives in Cairo on the Nile, 75% of it comes not from the Lake Victoria, it comes from Ethiopia. Well, sensibly, they were saying, we're going to dam it up. We're going to use the water for ourselves, hydroelectric plants and so forth. But of course, that was creating massive problems with the two countries north of Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt, that needed that water too. And now Ethiopia is going to take it away. They've kind of negotiated some of that through. I don't know what the negotiations are. Of course, once you leave these countries, you go move on to the problems with the next country you visit. But uh, they at least seem to be talking about that as opposed to fighting war. Although Sudan is in the middle of a continuous miserable civil war, largely because, or at least partially because, some of the land that the black people have been living on in Sudan is desertified. So we're just confirming what a mess this is. Anybody got a solution here? We know what the solution is, right? You redistribute the wealth. There is water in Africa. There's a fair number of rivers. There's nothing close to the benefit that the East Asia has with the Himalayas right there and all those glaciers and all those incredible big rivers. But there are good water sources, but they would have to be shared. Mike, where's Michael? I see a hand.
I'm here. My solution is we need a few good wars to reduce just cynical.
Well, that is there was some. Was it Beckley? No, it was Free Zakaria talking to someone last Sunday, talking about how what brought people finally around to the post World War II settlement, and the answer was pretty obvious that we can't do this. We already done it twice in 20 years, World War I, World War II. We can't keep doing this, so we've got to readjust. And the readjustments were sort of were established in Bretton Woods, which is now presumed to be adjustments that fell apart, are gone. So maybe we go on. Should we? I've got a Bretton Woods presentation. Should we? Is that okay to go through that?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. We're going to go back to Jenna's going to get us back to the PowerPoint. There we are. Okay, we'll go north. We'll click on this. And there we go. Okay, so a few graphics. Everyone knows this. This is of how awful World War II was. Much more worse even than World War I, which is this is Stalingrad. This is Hiroshima. Many of you, I think, have probably visited the Peace Center there. You can weep seeing what happened to Japan. Germany devastated. Dresden, Slaughterhouse Five, Vonnegut, blah blah blah. So even before the war was over, Western leaders said we can't keep doing this. Let's get together somewhere and plan an order that do what we did not do after World War I and do it better this time. So they met at Bretton Woods. Some of you have been there. Jan and I were there a while ago. Jan's got to try and get there we go. in 1944. By the time the Battle of Stalingrad was won by the Soviet Union, the world knew, the Western world knew that the Nazis were going to be defeated. It was just a matter of time. Japan was a different story, but 730 representatives for 44 nations. There were only 70 to 74 nations back there in 1944. Met in Bretton Woods to plan. And the planning was to avoid the stuff that started World War I and World War II, the Depression, economic nationalism, some control over economic growth so everyone benefited. I mean, there's John Maynard Keynes down there on the right sitting next to the Soviet Union. They were invited, for God's sakes. There's one of the delegates showing up. Yeah, there's a chuckle. So the Bretton Woods Agreement, hammered out in 1944, lasted from 1944, 45, 46 to, well, till when? It depends on your point of view. If one of the goals was to have a stable currency exchange rates around the world, well, that was gone by 1971. But if instead you say, well, there was more to it than that, there was also rules-based economic rules, the IMF, what turned into the WTO, if that lasted much longer. But it's sort of commonly thought these days that in 2001, that sort of fell apart once China became part of the WTO. So let's sort of work our way through here. This is what they planned. And this will sound familiar because, or maybe it will, maybe it won't. They say this currency instability was one of the problems. And so let's have stable currencies. The decision was we're going to peg all other world currencies or major world currencies to the dollar, and and the dollar itself is going to be pegged too. It's not going to move. Its value won't move up and down. It's going to be pegged at the rate of it takes $35 to buy an ounce of gold. And this sort of worked for a while. The dollar, of course, then became the de facto international reserve currency, which it to some degree sort of is, but you can see it's sort of eroding. The exchange rates would have to adjust periodically, but they would not adjust because of market mechanisms, but because the IMF said so and said, yeah, we know periodically that some economies are getting stronger, some are getting weaker. We got to adjust the value of the currencies. Down below, I've got some examples. Many of you traveled to Europe in some period of this time. For me, it was 1967, and I can remember these currency rates. And I sort of asked, I didn't understand it back then, and they got adjusted periodically, but they got adjusted by the IMF, and only rarely, not every single day. So on what basis were they adjusted? Well, periodically the IMF would say, hey, look, let's sit down and realize that some countries are continuously deficit countries. They're either borrowing too much or they're selling gold. They can't really defend the value of their currency. Others are doing better, like Germany. They're either lending money or they're buying gold. And so we will adjust these currencies, but they did it on the basis of not just economic data, but let's also consider what matters in each of these countries. Social stability matters too. So let's not go wild on daily adjustments of currency. They'll be every 4 or 5 years. And they did this rather effectively for some period of time. And then in 1971, it all went to hell. That whole system disappeared. Why did it disappear? I think many of you know this, but because we, who were supposed to guarantee the value of the dollar because it was pegged to $35 an ounce of gold, couldn't do it anymore. 1971 ran our first trade deficit for a long time. It wasn't a very big trade deficit compared to what we have now today, but that trade, I mean, teeny tiny, but even so, the Nixon crowd sat around and said, France set it off. France said, look, we don't think your dollar is worth what you say it is. We certainly don't think it's worth $35 for an ounce of gold. And we want gold. And the Nixon people sat at Camp David for 3 years, for 30 days and said, what are we going to do about this? Because if we could probably buy France off, but if other countries also start demanding gold for dollars, our dollar's going to have to fall. And that'll have real effects. This is 1971. I'm Nixon. I've got to be reelected in 72. I can't have a crisis here. What do we do? And he said, well, we're not backing our dollar up with gold anymore. And no one does anymore. And so I think if you don't know this, this is mind-boggling. I think almost everyone does know it. By 1973, all major currencies then and still today, the value is determined by market forces. And Bob Oxenberg will interfere, will not interfere. He will correct me when I make some statements on this because he's corrected me before. But some of those market forces, major market forces, are the currency speculating crowd. Their job is to make profits for their investors. They make decisions on what currencies to short. I'm selling these currencies short because I think they really are not worth what the government says they are, or buy currencies which they assume are soon going to go up. And they do that every day of the week. It's a rather stunning amount of money that moves around. Look at that bottom graphic, April 2025. The daily value of gold currency speculation on a single day was $9.6 trillion in a single day.
Huh.
Now, some of this is not speculation. If you've got I'll give an example later. If you're an Uzbeki who's buying Swiss chocolate and you're using Uzbeki currency, the Swiss are not going to take Uzbeki currency. They're going to have to they want something else. So some of this is just clearing the trade, international trade. But to see some of the crises that happened, this is, again, some of you are familiar with this. On a single day in September 1992, Soros earned $1 billion because his bet won. He has shorted the UK pound, and the UK government tried to continue to. He said, "I don't think it's worth what you say it is in US dollars." And I'm selling. I have the ability to go to a bank and short sell a bunch of currency. God knows how many billions of dollars he had to do this. We're familiar with this because everything I think has seen the movie, or read the book, the Big Short, when this happened in our country fairly recently. So the British, when a government is facing this kind of attack on the value of their currency, you can try and defend it by saying, you want dollars? We'll give you dollars. Here you go. But sooner or later you run out of dollars and you give up and say, okay, you win. And the value of the pound drops. And now Soros can buy back the pounds he owes the bank at a much cheaper rate. And so you say, good for Soros. Well, yeah, but not good for British taxpayers. This is $1 billion of taxpayer money that Soros has got that they don't have to open schools and run their national service and so forth. It got worse in the period 1997, 98. Currency speculators went kind of crazy. And one country after another saw the value of their currencies just plummet, just like Britain did then. First it was Thailand, and Thailand deserved some of the pain they got because they had overborrowed. The currency speculators knew they had overborrowed. Malaysia was similarly. Malaysia was in much better shape. You can see the list of countries. Eventually it finally stopped when the IMF came in and said, look, currency speculators, we're telling you today that if you keep doing this, we've got enough money. We will, if the country that's being attacked can't give you dollars, we will. And you're going to lose money. So stop this crap. But enormous damage had been done. The stock market collapsed for a while. Most horribly, all millions and millions of people in these countries were hurt. They lost their jobs. They couldn't pay their loans. They borrowed to start businesses. The business went bankrupt. I mean, real pain around the world, um, and other sorts of stuff. One of the countries, one of the countries that was unfairly attacked was South Korea. Their finances were in pretty good shape, but they did not have. You got a hand up somewhere, Bob? Bob.
Yeah, I just was going to say, Ramsay, I think you've got it completely right. I was just going to make a couple of comments
Go ahead.
on the role of speculators. Yeah, I mean, classically, they're viewed as nasty capitalist interventionists, but the other side of the argument is that they provide enormous liquidity to allow all the trade-related exchanges of currency to go on.
Good.
And quite often, speculators get hurt themselves. I mean, it's
Oh yeah, they don't win every day.
One great trade that was made by Soros on one day. There's 100 bad trades out there as well. The comment I wanted to make was, that was one on the fact that speculation has been argued to be what keeps the wheels oiled or greased. The other is it's interesting you put up Soros, because we have today a Treasury Secretary in Decent who actually cut his teeth working for Soros.
It's good Lord.
Back in the day, he was worked with Soros for many years as a younger man. That was just the trivial comment I was going to make.
Okay, no, it's not trivial whatsoever. You're adding depth that I always forget because I can't. So it's not that these are the worst people known to man, but it is.
Well,
true.
they are.
But it is true that all their total job is to make money for the wealthy people that can buy their services. They do not consider what damages can be done to the people on the average kid, the average human being that is a victim. And here's one of them in this picture, the graphic I'm sitting. I love this guy. I couldn't wait to show this slide every year to my econ government students. Said, this guy's got it exactly right. I've been IMF'd. And he said, I've been fired. Well, he knows very well what the other F word could be here in IMF'd. I am, you know what. And even when the IMF came in and bailed out these countries, this became one of this is a reason why the IMF is sort of losing has maybe even lost its status, is the conditions it imposes on these countries for getting a loan to pay back. Well, what's the loan? What's the IMF loan used to by these countries? Is to pay back the investors that should have just lost the money. But no, the investors sort of get bailed out by the IMF, while the taxpayers of South Korea, the various other countries have to suck it up for decades, for years. The brutal repayment loans, stuff like you have to raise taxes, you have to use some of those taxes that have been raised. Many of those taxes have to be used to pay back the people that you borrowed money from. And you'll probably have to cut the social spending because that money needs to go to pay back the investors. It's a fairly corrupt system. Maybe the worst of all was what happened to Russia. The Russian economy completely collapsed in 1999 because of currency speculators. And two things that occurred because of that. Well, one, the already completely corrupt loans for share program, which you'll have to read. We could talk about that later if you want, but utterly corrupt. The rich people could loan the government money to pay back its loans, but in turn, the collateral that the government put up was its mineral wealth, and pretty soon the corrupt oligarchs who had a source of money controlled all of Russia's mineral wealth, as they still do today. And the other wonderful thing that happened because of this collapse was Yeltsin, who was always drunk, finally said, "Okay, I'm resigning. I'm going to appoint this new guy. You've never heard of him, but he's going to save Russia." So Putin is appointed president at that moment when the Russian economy collapsed because of currency speculation in Russia. And then, so there's a lot of stuff that hangs together if you pay sort of attention. What's the, oh, here, I just, for what it's worth, I sort of found this International Monetary Fund report from relatively recent times. And the report says, well, it's still a problem. I mean, we've seen that the monetary system in the world is not in stable ground. We saw it in 1997, 98. We saw it again in 2008, 2009. It's still not in good shape. And we'd also, in a report, like to talk about the role of the U.S. Congress in shaping U.S. policy at the IMF, because we kind of run the IMF. So one of the things to put
International Monetary.
hand up somewhere. No,
Now, Ramsey, the one thing I just in the chat, I put a not totally related graph about why billionaires are giving so much money to Republicans. And I don't know if the corruption goes hand in hand with Republicans, but I found that interesting. Just that if you look, the last few years, the amount of money given to Republicans compared to Democrats is like fivefold changed. And I don't know if that's following the money and following, Soros, but I found it
who know? Well, we certainly know that a fair amount of it's coming from Silicon Valley or the AI people
AI, yeah.
who do not want to be regulated. Meanwhile, Europe is going ahead and regulating as we speak.
Yeah.
They're debating in the EU Parliament, or not debating, but they're trying to work out the legislation because you got 27 countries that have to be satisfied with the regulation of not just of forcing, saying each national government has to monitor, has to crack. Oh God, I forget my poor old brain, old man. Uh, has to be able to monitor any social media or any other media that is producing stuff that would harm
All
children.
from the Morgan Hill.
What was that? Who knows? Okay.
All from the Morgan Hill.
Someone needs to mute.
Whoever's got a call from
All
Morgan,
from the Morgan Hill.
whoever's getting a call from Morgan Hill.
Hilda, mute Hilda.
Morgan
Thank you. Go, Craig. The other thing that Bretton Woods people did was to say, let's set up some institutions now that are there as safety gaps for problems that we are going to come up. Germany would never have started a war. There would have been no Nazis if there had been an IMF. The IMF could have loaned Germany money in 1923 and again in 1929 to get through the misery of the stock market crash in 29 and the damn French demanding money from them in 1923. So let's have the IMF to stand in there and loan money to countries that are in trouble. That's a good thing, whether the IMF does it fairly or not. Secondly, they said, we're going to have all these new countries that are going to be independent relatively soon as colonial empires fall apart. And you got one country after another becoming independent. You need a World Bank to lend those countries money. We're not going to, and most of all, we've got to start doing what we know works if we get it to work right. We got to remove trade barriers, no tariffs and so forth. Well, we'll start with the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. And by 1995, that whole arrangement was became the WTO and so forth and so forth. These were good ideas, and they've all sort of worked for a while. But I think most people here and there would say they're not working so well anymore. The IMF, which is not surprisingly located in the U.S., in Washington, D.C. You go visit D.C., it's actually fun to go stand in front of it and say, oh, yeah, there's the IMF, not just it's had lots of successes. One, just mentioned South Korea, but Mexico's been bailed out 4 times. UK was bailed out itself in 67, I think, by the IMF. But recently not done so well, and countries are increasingly balking at these demanding measures that are demanded of them. Raise your taxes, cut social spending, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to look for a better source of money. And China's sitting there waiting with that better source of money. The World Bank has had some successes as well, but lots of criticism that oftentimes the projects the World Bank funds are more gifts to construction companies from Canada or the United States or Germany than they are from the people that are getting the loans. Not necessarily the citizens of the various countries, Ethiopia or wherever, are not necessarily consulted with these great projects that the World Bank lends. And so it's sort of lost some of its status. And the World Trade Organization, well, the argument was it sort of succeeded for a long time, creating an atmosphere that we should lower trade barriers, lower trade barriers, lower trade barriers. It was the notion of that we heard that globalization was going to work, or China is going to soon be capitalist and play by the rules, and other countries will come along. And it just hasn't worked very well recently. The argument goes China's the problem. That China was allowed in 2001. That whole story is interesting itself, but in they come. How could you keep them out? But the argument now is, well, we let them in, assuming that if we let them in, then I'm going to be sarcastic here. We believed our own propaganda that as soon as they're allowed into the trading system, pretty soon they'll have democracy and they'll have presidents and they'll have constitutions and they'll have the wonderful system we've got now. Good Lord. And the Chinese had different ideas. And so we complain that they subsidize their companies. That's not fair. And they have all the benefits of being part of the World Trade System, but they don't play by fair games. The Chinese, of course, say, what do you mean it's not fair? We're doing the same damn thing you did when you started out as a country. Remember Alexander Hamilton and his tariffs and various countries and their tariffs. And so the Chinese, I mean, this is actually, we might pause here for a moment if people want to debate this or have opinions about this. We'll hear it endlessly. I hear it from Zakaria every goddamn time we turn him on. I like Zakaria, but he's obsessed with this. And China's not playing fair. I said, well, if what they're doing is working so damn well, why don't we do it too? But let's. So the Chinese accusation is hypocrisy. The Chinese will say, you do the same thing. You have tariffs. You have anti-dumping laws. You subsidize your development of stuff. I mean, don't tell me that the internet didn't come from government subsidies, and AI probably is too. And your consumers are benefiting. Just look at Christmas time and how much they're going to buy from China. So you want to talk about it? Just come to WTO and we'll talk about it. So this is an interesting debate. Anyone got any opinions here that they want to share? Because I kind of go back and forth. I think China's got a point, but at the same time, we got a point too. For example, why can't I buy a Chinese electric car? They are as good as the Teslas, maybe even better, and they're 10 times cheaper. Of course, the argument is, well, they're being subsidized by Chinese. I mean, you're getting away. You're buying something that's going to benefit China, not us. And they didn't really earn their right to sell to you because they've got all this cheap labor and so forth. And my attitude is, well, I don't give a damn. I want to buy a Chinese electric car. They're good, and I don't want to buy it. I don't want to subsidize that jerk, and I don't want to. I can't afford a Tesla anyway. So we got hands that are going to come up. Maybe I hope.
Want to stop your
Yeah, we're going to stop. We're going to stop and see if hands come up.
Michael?
Is China right or is China wrong? John. No, I can't hear you.
You're muted.
You're muted.
If you look at solar power, you can say China did it the wrong way, but the bottom line is that Africa, we've been talking about Africa, they're going to be able to leapfrog over electrification with solar panels spread in little villages all across the continent. And why was that? Well, it was the distortions of the Chinese market that allowed dumping. And it just happened that what the world needed to have dumped on it was a lot of solar panels. So how's that for an argument?
I like it, but we'll see what other people have to say. Michael, unmute you. Mute.
He's on mute.
One question I have about China, particularly electric vehicles, and for that matter, their military equipment. Do they sell it anywhere else in the world? Do they sell their electric cars in Europe? Do they sell their electric cars in Africa, in India? Likewise, their military equipment. I mean, there's a tremendous, you talk about the military industrial complex. China is producing a lot of stuff that is much state of the art in terms of military equipment, but I don't know that anybody's approached China about buying that stuff or that China's offered it. I'm just asking, is China selling this stuff? Are they trying to sell this stuff elsewhere?
Yeah.
Mike can answer the question. Are they selling? Are Chinese electric vehicles being sold elsewhere? They're being sold everywhere but the United States. If you drive, last time I was in Europe, everywhere you go, it used to be just Teslas. It's now BYDs. And they are superb vehicles by all reports. The cabs in Madrid are mostly Chinese electric vehicles. So yes, they are being sold elsewhere. Of course, we have 100% tariff on them, which, as you all know, was introduced under the Biden administration, not the Trump administration. And the Europeans are just debating now how high their tariffs should be to save their own electric vehicle industry, particularly Volkswagens, because they are entering crisis situation with competition from Chinese EVs.
All right. Well, I'm glad to know that.
Well, so there, thank you. I wouldn't have been, I had a suspicion that we'd see a lot of these things. Where was I? We were in Honduras and going to some mine ruin in Honduras and a little mini cab, one of these three-wheeled things that people use to tour around. I said, "Well, this is not Chinese. Where's this thing made? India. The Tata country makes a lot of those things. So as you know, I think we all know, before a period of time, we dominated the world's economy because we were the only game in town. But we got competition now, and if China is doing it better, I'd say, why don't we copy some of what China's doing? Now the argument goes, look, we can't copy China because their labor costs are so much lower, and we could not possibly do that. And say, yeah, well,
John has his hand.
John. John, go ahead.
You all remember traveling in Latin America and walking in a major city and the smell of diesel buses.
Yes.
Yes. China is trading electric buses throughout Latin America now. So perhaps in the distant future, visiting will not leave you with that olfactory memory.
Aiko, where's Aiko? Aiko's
Right
got a hand
here,
up.
right here.
You got you.
Hi. The thing is that, China has 3 times the population that we do, and so does India for that matter. How do we compete against that kind of demographic? We could let a lot of people in and increase our population. But what do you think? I mean, how can you compete against those numbers?
Well, if you go back and read Beckley's article, he will say, look, China looks awfully strong, but they got a lot of problems.
Yeah, I know that.
And the demographics is one of them. The one-child policy, in almost every way, it was a sensible policy. On the other hand, they got a massive problem soon to come with all these people. So maybe one thing that occurs to me is that this whole notion of retirement has got to be rethought. That maybe retirement is an outdated concept in much of the world. But one answer to that question would be if we would start running a trade surplus instead of an endless trade deficit, we could say, well, we want some of that action too. We're just going to invest in Chinese companies, and they pay a good interest rate, and we're smart enough to not consume the enormous amount of crap that we're about to consume at Christmas time. What is it? 45% of all of our sales are between now and Christmas. You know, half of it, which is just returned the next day or not used or whatever. I mean, we could readjust our whole consumption nonsense and save money and invest. So we could turn our savings into wealth. Bob has his hand up.
Just another comment on electric vehicle exports by China. I quickly looked it up. Last year, they exported 1.2 million electric vehicles, China, in total. This year, they will export 2.5 million electric vehicles. What is, I'm going to ask a question of you all. What is the sum total of US manufactured cars which are exported? What's the number?
No idea.
I mentioned just now numbers of 2.5 million electric vehicles alone from China, which is the bulk of their exports. They don't export
500,000.
ICEs.
Janet's saying 500,000.
The US exports 150,000 vehicles a year, of which I'm going to ask you, which is the largest manufacturer that exports vehicles from the United States? You haven't got many names to guess from, so I'm putting you on the spot. Somebody.
Toyota.
No,
It's a good guess. It's actually BMW is the largest exporter of US-made vehicles from not Detroit, but from South Carolina.
South Carolina, sure. Yeah, of course.
It's after 3.
Okay, where Janet's telling me it's after 3, and let's perfect. We've got lots of stuff left the next time. Should we go on 5 more minutes and finish this thing off and save? Let's at least do that. Janet, can you get us back to the PowerPoint? Yada yada yada. Okay, where were we? John, of course, okay. So focus. We're gonna
Focus on you.
So we won't. We'll come back. We'll start back here again. This is actually ideal. The system that was put in place in Bretton Woods was what Dexter White wanted put in place. Dexter White is the American finance minister there, having a conversation with John Maynard Keynes, and White won. We want to be the world's currency. We want the IMF in Washington, D.C., blah, blah, blah. Keynes, who, of course, to some degree was jealous that the U.S. was going to now take over the world leadership from what he thought belonged in the U.K. But not that aside, Keynes had a better idea than most people would say this was better. One, it was too idealistic for the time in 1944, probably. And secondly, Dexter White was never going to let it happen. So if anyone wants to come back next Tuesday, John, this is working out just perfectly. We can go through John Maynard Keynes' proposal, which I would argue, and there's a fair number of people out there arguing. Some guy from Greece that rides a motorcycle. What's his name, John? This keeps coming up periodically, is to say this would make sense in the world that we're talking about in the 21st century as solving the same problems, but more effectively. So we'll come back to that. And if anyone's so I guess we're going to say goodbye, don't we? Because everyone's got to go to do things. John, you want to wrap it up?
Will you tell the story about how the EU got together?
Yes. Yeah, we'll finish with John Maynard Keynes thing. We'll take half the time, and then I also want to say, look, we really, if you want an example of something that's not quite full yet done, but doggone it, give the Europeans credit in some ways. I mean, 2 world wars, nationalism. Now nationalism is for soccer, and the other stuff is. They had a system that we ought to know in some detail how it works. And one of the ways it works, I'll leave this as a final thought, is they kind of redo. They don't have a constitution, but they alter their rules, which is kind of like a constitution, pretty much every decade. And this is spoiling what I wanted to say for next week.
Okay, so the answer to the question on who is the Greek that you're thinking of is Yanis Varoufakis.
Yeah, I love that guy. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about him next time.
Okay.
And because when, well, I want to finish this thought because some of people just watch the Ken Burns thing and so forth, and the Alexander Hamilton. I mean, Thomas Jefferson is part of it all the time. Thomas Jefferson, late in life, was saying, you know, this Constitution of ours is we knew it at the time. It's not really very good. I would recommend every generation gets to rewrite it, and they should rewrite it. And no generation should be stuck with with the wisdom of the last generation, the things they were trying to solve. So I remember every 15, every 19 to 20 years, it should be rebuilt. I wish to hell that Ken Burns had put that in his videos because we're about, as you well know, we are on the verge of next year of celebrating celebrating the Declaration of Independence, but the Constitution will be part of it. And these guys knew damn well that it wasn't that good. That was why they had to write this all this propaganda about the Federalist Papers. And most of it's propaganda. Hamilton, the rest of them said, I wrote stuff that I knew wasn't true. I was just trying to get New York to approve the goddamn Constitution, and it worked. So, all right, we'll leave it to this week. John or Bob.
Well, I watched all 6 episodes of Ken Burns' American Revolution, and I learned, at least temporarily, because I'll forget it all, so much. It's because it's very lengthy. It's in excruciating detail. But one thing that struck me was, whilst numbering the number of dead in each battle, 75, 220, 430, in the meantime, thousands were dying from disease. Oh, I'm not sure that it was the cannon being hauled from which lake? Lake Charles? Not Lake Charles. Champagne.
Yeah, for Ticonderoga, yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting the name of that fort. I really must visit it. Yeah, they hauled 50 cannon down to Boston from there, and
in the middle of winter. In the middle of winter, for God's sake.
Yeah, over the Adirondack. How do you say it? The Adirondacks?
Adirondacks.
Yeah,
you can tell I'm a West Coast immigrant. If you've never visited Fort Ticonderoga, do it sometime. I'm planning. Actually, Annie come with me. We maybe go in May, and then up the Hudson River, then up to Montreal and Quebec City, which we've never been to. But it was really not so much the shooting that killed off the big number of Americans on either side. Yeah. The other thing that I have taken from it is, and he mentioned it, of course, it was very much a civil war. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah, I never thought of it as a civil war.
We do our best. We do our best teaching U.S. history to get that point across. Of course, I think we've succeeded for about 3 months, and then all the propaganda takes over, and it's back to the most idealistic war ever fought by mankind, and blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay. Well done.
I'm right at Valley Forge, and that point in the documentary, and where Washington has decided that, you know what, we're going to inoculate everybody.
Yeah, it's about time you figure this out, old man. Yeah. Okay, thanks for showing up. Maybe we'll see some of you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for doing